The emergency session of the Galactic Compact opened under a ceiling of rotating star maps, each projection dimmed to amber because the Krellix delegation had requested commercial lighting suitable for contract review. Ambassador Elena Hayes stood at the human dais in dress black with a silver earth pin, hands resting flat on a legal slate, while 400 delegates watched the central floor. Across from her, the Krellix Merchant League occupied an entire crescent of raised seating, their lacquered exosuits reflecting the chamber lights like polished shell. Their banner did not show a flag, only a ledger sigil, and 3 words in tradecont: continuance is stability. The crux of the meeting was clear to every species present. The Krellix had arrived promising life without decay, and they had written the price in sovereignty. High Commander Owen descended to the speaking ring with the confidence of a species that had broken governments without firing a shot. He was tall, even for a Krellix. Plated shoulders edged in ceremonial copper, voice translated into flawless standard, with an almost kind cadence that made his contempt more efficient. "Members of the Compact," he said, letting the chamber settle into silence. "The Merchant League extends a civilizational gift. Our licensed continuance wells halt biological senescence, repair organ failure, and maintain productive life indefinitely through routine service cycles. We offer this not as conquest but as uplift for short-lived toolmakers still trapped by the superstition of mortality. We have reviewed human outputs, impressive improvisation, high emotional bonding, useful pattern recognition. Yet your species still permits natural death and treats this failure as culture. We do not mock your limitations. We provide remedy." He turned his faceted gaze toward the human dais. "Your worlds will require infrastructure discipline, jurisdictional harmonization, and labor allocation standards to sustain treatment access. These are reasonable terms. Species that value survival sign quickly." The contract packet hit every delegate console at once, and the chamber shifted from murmurs to hard stillness. Hayes scrolled through the first annex and felt the argument sharpen into anger. Continuance access required licensing boards staffed by Krellix officers with authority above local law. Default clauses transferred mineral rights and orbital traffic control to League trustees. Workforce obligations were indexed to treatment tiers, which meant the most medically dependent populations would become labor guarantees. A subsection titled Compliance Preservation authorized protective detention of dependents from non-compliant governments until arrears cleared. The language remained antiseptic, mathematically tidy, and predatory in every direction. Signing would not make humanity immortal. It would make humanity collateral. The delegates from smaller systems read faster because many recognized the architecture from older disasters. The avians of Kith tucked their wings tight and whispered to one another in clipped alarm. A scholar from Lum requested clarification on extraterritorial enforcement and received a Krellix smile in response, as if the question proved charming naivety. Owen invited further inquiries with a patient tilt of his head. "The League has executed 23 successful continuance integrations," he said. "Initial resistance is common among emerging polities. Resistance declines when citizens understand treatment interruption consequences. We advise human leadership not to stage emotional theatrics around sovereignty myths. Your people will ask for access. They will ask loudly. Better to proceed in orderly partnership than in domestic panic." Hayes let him finish. Beside her, Earth's legal attaché sent a private ping, highlighting one buried provision she had already found. Disputes would be adjudicated exclusively in Krellix commercial courts, where debt priority ranked above sapient rights petitions. Another ping came from Rear Admiral Thomas Becker, watching from Fleet Liaison seating 3 rows behind her. He sent only 3 words. We expected this. Hayes rose, touched the console, and the human microphone came live. Her voice carried cleanly through the chamber's old acoustic field. The United Human Delegation acknowledges receipt of the League proposal, she said. We also acknowledge that the proposal is coercive by structure, deceptive by framing, and incompatible with compact law on sovereign consent. A life extension platform tied to jurisdiction transfer and labor seizure is not medicine. It is ownership with clinical branding. Humanity does not dispute the value of reducing suffering. We dispute your assumption that survival requires surrender. Owen did not interrupt. He listened with the polite expression of a creditor hearing a debtor discuss principles. When Hayes finished, he folded his upper hands and replied in the same measured tone. Ambassador, your phrasing is dramatic and biologically understandable. Short-lived species overinvest in autonomy symbolism because time scarcity amplifies fear response. The League does not require your philosophical comfort. We require operational compliance where treatment assets are deployed. Earth alone represents a subscription base sufficient to stabilize 3 frontier sectors. Your refusal would deprive billions of corrective care for the sake of political theater. History will not honor that posture. He angled his gaze toward the wider chamber, inviting the audience to witness human irrationality. Any polity still dying naturally has limited standing to negotiate longevity policy. The phrase landed exactly as intended. Delegates who feared Krellick's power looked away from the human dais, calculating risks. Delegates who hated the League looked down, calculating survival. Hayes saw both calculations and logged them without resentment. Fear did not erase memory. It only delayed action. She closed her slate, gave Owen a nod that conveyed neither deference nor outrage, and sat. The vote request for immediate contract adoption failed procedural threshold by a narrow margin, which meant the League had not won the chamber. It also meant they had measured every weak point in the room. 3 hours later, beneath the council complex in a conference vault shielded from external scans, Hayes met the human response cell around a plain steel table scarred by decades of emergency use. Admiral David Mitchell joined by Hollow from Earth Defense Command, gray streaks visible at his temples despite the projection artifacts. Colonel Marcus Sullivan stood in person at the wall display, broad-shouldered and still in boarding armor, minus helmet, one gauntlet tucked under his arm like a promise. Intelligence Director Anna Novak arrived last with 2 tablets and no expression at all. The door sealed. External feeds cut. Hayes placed the Krellick's contract in the center where everyone could see the labor clauses highlighted in red. Mitchell spoke first, voice low and exact. Compact observers confirm League enforcement groups already moving toward Valari refugee corridors. Not a raid posture yet, but they are positioning customs cutters as if seizure authority is established. We are also tracking long-range traffic near Lagrange Relay 9. Civilian patterns may be staged, may be real. Either way, they are building a legal pretext before they build a battlefield. Novak slid 1 tablet toward Hayes. The screen showed network maps of Krellick's financial architecture, not warship silhouettes. Their strength is procedural velocity, she said. They file 3,000 claims before lunch, then call resistance unlawful by sunset. We cannot outshout that. We can outdocument it and outtime it. Sullivan tapped the wall, bringing up a rotating image of the League's command carrier classes. And if paperwork fails? He asked. It was not bravado. It was sequencing. Hayes answered without looking away from the contract. Paperwork does not fail if we built the right paper years ago. She turned to Novak. Status on reciprocal compacts. Novak's eyes lifted. drafted over 19 years with 21 minor polities the League treated as expendable, most never publicized. All include anti-coercion defense triggers and synchronized court filings. If activated, the compact court can freeze contested claims before League trustees take possession. Mitchell gave a thin smile that held no humor. We spent 2 decades getting called sentimental by larger powers for helping small governments with legal code audits. Turns out sentiment has excellent strategic utility. By the second week of September, every human embassy had rehearsed this contingency so often that even junior staff could quote the filing sequence from memory. Hayes opened a secure channel to the legal teams waiting on standby across 6 systems, then closed it again without sending the trigger. Not yet. Timing would decide whether the League appeared aggressive or merely overconfident, and public framing would shape how many neutral worlds moved. She looked around the room, taking each face in turn. Mitchell represented fleet depth nobody advertised. Nobody. Novak represented a cyber directorate that preferred invoices to explosions until it could not. Sullivan represented the final line, the people who crossed hatches when policy ended. None of them looked rattled. That steadiness was the human advantage outsiders kept misreading as softness. Hayes stood and gathered the tablets into a stack. They think this is a market acquisition, she said. They think mortality makes us easy to corner because people fear endings. They are wrong about the psychology, and worse, about the logistics. We will issue one formal warning, time-stamped and public. We will give them room to withdraw because we are not what they are. If they move on the Valerii or attempt contract enforcement in our space, we treat it as hostile action and execute the full response package. Sullivan set his gauntlet on the table with a quiet metal click. Understood. Mitchell inclined his head once. Novak sent the first encrypted prep signal before anyone else moved. Above them, in the council chamber, Krellick's aides were already scheduling subscription briefings for Earth's projected high-demand demographics. In the vault below, humanity finalized a different schedule, one built on law, memory, and a patience that had just run out. In the vault below, Novak's encrypted prep signal returned with 21 green acknowledgments in less than 12 seconds, each one tagged from a minor polity that had once accepted human legal aid in exchange for nothing more than reciprocal transparency clauses. Hayes watched the list populate, then ordered the line held in passive mode. No filings yet, no fleet movement visible, no excuse for the Krellicks to claim they had been ambushed by process. A soft chime interrupted the room's silence. Mitchell's hollow flickered as Earth Defense pushed an urgent civil channel patch into the shielded feed. A Valerii convoy beacon appeared over the table, stuttering between identity keys as if someone upstream was rewriting tags in transit. Novak did not curse. She simply expanded the data and highlighted the source authority. Krellick's Customs Enforcement, attached by emergency decree in a jurisdiction where the League had no standing. They moved faster than expected, she said. 3 cutters, a registry clean, backed by 2 contract escorts with debt reclamation transponders active. They are claiming 74 Valerii refugees as collateral subscribers for medical arrears accumulated under a defunct League charter. Sullivan looked at Hayes. Defunct how? Defunct because the signatory world dissolved after famine and annexation, Novak replied. The League preserved the debt ledger and ignored the dead government. Standard Krellick's continuity doctrine. If a debtor disappears, obligations transfer to biological descendants and affiliated populations. Their claim is nonsense by compact law and perfectly functional in their own courts. Hayes was already standing. Patch Council Emergency Channel. Full recording. Public archive mirror to every member delegation. I want this warning heard in real time, not quoted afterward. The vault doors opened into a private lift, and she stepped in with Sullivan and Novak, while Mitchell remained linked by Hollow, his image riding in the corner of her wrist slate like a second pair of eyes. The lift rose through concrete and old alloy ribs into the diplomatic level, and by the time the doors parted, aides were already moving at a controlled run toward the chamber's auxiliary broadcast suite. No one shouted. The crisis moved too quickly for theatrics. In Orbit Hall C, Hayes took position at a standing console framed by compact insignia and activated the red band channel reserved for imminent interspecies violations. The room around her was smaller than the main chamber, built for rapid arbitration rather than speeches, but every network in the council complex rerouted the feed automatically. Owen joined from a Krellix command deck via Hollow, his image rendered at full height, copper-edged shoulders immaculate, translated voice smooth as polished glass. "Ambassador Hayes," he said, "if this concerns the Valeri medical lien, you are witnessing lawful continuity recovery. We are preventing treatment abandonment among registered dependents." Hayes did not blink. "Hi, Commander Owen. This is a formal warning under Compact Emergency Statute 12.7 and Human Defense Charter Article 4. Your enforcement groups are operating without jurisdiction inside protected refugee lanes, detaining Valari civilians under fraudulent debt inheritance doctrine, and invoking medical coercion to transfer legal control. Withdraw all Krellix assets from those lanes within 72 standard hours. Release all detained Valari immediately. Cease preparatory movement near human infrastructure, including Lagrange Relay 9. Failure to comply will be treated as hostile action." The chamber feed went so quiet that ventilation fans became audible. Owen tilted his head, as if evaluating a supplier who had mistaken negotiation for leverage. "Your warning is emotionally coherent and commercially irrelevant," he replied. "The Valari are not your citizens. Their arrears are properly indexed. The League's continuity rights are older than your species' first orbital launch and survive local governance collapse by design. You speak of fraud because mortality cultures confuse urgency with authority. Let me be precise so no one mistakes this exchange. If humans interfere with continuance enforcement, we will apply service denial protocols to all unauthorized recipients in your trade network, then compel compliance through asset guardianship. Your populations will experience preventable loss and hold your government responsible." Hayes leaned closer to the microphone, tone steady enough to make the words heavier. "Listen carefully. You are not describing healthcare. You are describing hostage management. We have documented your clause architecture, your detention language, and your jurisdictional overreach. The record is live, mirrored, and immutable. You have 72 hours because we prefer law to wreckage. Use them." Owen's mandibles clicked once, faintly audible beneath the translator output. "When the first human world petitions us for access and your administration fails to provide, your terms will degrade beyond recovery. This is professional advice." The channel cut from his side before protocol closure. For 2 seconds, nobody in Hall C moved. Then, Novak set a hand on Hayes' console and pushed a command packet through 6 legal relays at once. "Warning logged," she said. Clock started. Auto notices sent to compact court intake, refugee oversight, and neutral observers. Sullivan was already reading the tactical updates scrolling across his forearm display. "Krellix cutters accelerated during the exchange," he said. "They wanted the warning on record while they tightened the net." Mitchell's voice came from the slate speaker, clipped and level. "Fleet liaison confirms additional League traffic near Mars transfer lanes. Not battle posture yet. Too neat. They are building paperwork for an annexation claim." Hayes turned from the console and faced the human team clustered along the back wall. Legal officers, signal analysts, two exhausted junior diplomats with fresh data bands clutched like lifelines. "Execute Phase 1 defensive filings now," she said. "No discretionary delay. Every reciprocal compact gets activated. Every anti-coercion trigger gets stamped and mirrored. Admiral Mitchell, move rescue escort groups into legal observation range only. No weapons lock unless fired upon. Colonel Sullivan, prep boarding contingencies but keep them dark. Director Novak, start soft penetration on League Ledger AIs and map all automated port dependencies." A young attaché hesitated, then asked the question others were swallowing. "Do we think they will actually hit Relay 9? Hayes gave him the honest answer. Yes. They need one visible human node to claim emergency annexation. Relay 9 is civilian, busy, and close enough to Earth to force a panic cycle if they can control the narrative. She looked back at the empty hollow space where Owen had stood a moment earlier. He thinks fear will split us before facts arrive. He has mistaken us for previous clients. 9 hours later, while council delegates were still arguing procedure in 3 languages, Krellick's contract destroyers dropped out of fold space near Lagrange Relay 9, with transponders broadcasting medical annex authority under League Continuance Charter. The station's civilian controller challenged jurisdiction, received a packet of forged consent signatures, allegedly from Earth Health Ministries, and then lost uplink to external arbitration nodes under a directed comms jam precise enough to look like maintenance failure. High Commander Owen watched the operation from the command theater of the Ledger of Dawn and felt the familiar satisfaction of clean sequencing. His staff arrayed data in layered arcs around him. Debt compliance projections, social sentiment forecasts, expected legal objections ranked by disruption value. Human response models still showed the same weakness the League had exploited for generations. Populations under mortality stress did not remain disciplined when life extension access appeared threatened. They fragmented into factions, then begged for order at any price. Relay 9 secured, reported Sub-Executor Terral, a narrow-framed Krellix whose talent for bureaucratic aggression had made him wealthy and feared. Civilian casualties minimal. Docking law reclassified under Emergency Health Annex. Broadcast package prepared. "Run it," Owen said. The edit was elegant. Human distress audio from an old station fire drill, overlaid with current footage of Krellix boarding teams moving through calm corridors. A fabricated Chiron in Standard declared that relay authorities had requested temporary League administration to preserve medical continuity for high-risk populations. The clip went out to every open channel that would carry it. Terrell's foreclaws tapped approval into the distribution queue. Projected effect: human domestic polarization within 12 to 16 hours. Opposition blocs will accuse their government of withholding continuance access. Peripheral colonies likely to petition independently if central authority hesitates. Owen watched the first reaction metrics crawl in and frowned. Volume high. Sentiment unstable. But not the expected panic spike. Human networks were amplifying full-text legal citations, not fear slogans. Civilian mutual aid channels were pushing calm directives. Union hubs on Mars posted synchronized messages. Verify source. Preserve order. Await authenticated command traffic. "Where is the fracture curve?" Owen asked. Terrell enlarged the graph and attempted a tone that conveyed confidence. "Delayed by information noise. We can sharpen with targeted scarcity alerts and organ failure imagery. Their species is emotionally plastic under mortality pressure." Another officer interrupted from the logistics pit. "Resupply anomaly in Sector Delta 3. Port Authority denied docking to Cutter Ringfall citing collateral bond default." Owen turned one eye ridge toward him. "Administrative error. Appeal." Appeal submitted. Denied in 34 seconds by automated adjudicator. Same code in Delta 5 and Epsilon Gate. Terrell clicked irritation. Someone is spoofing debt status. Trace and isolate, Owen ordered. Continue operations. On the far side of the theater, a legal analyst raised two upper hands for attention. Compact Court Intake has accepted emergency filings from 21 polities, invoking reciprocal anti-coercion defense compacts. Lead sponsor, United Human Delegation. Claim requests immediate freeze of all league enforcement actions pending fraud review. For the first time that day, Owen felt a thin wire of uncertainty draw tight across his spine plating. 21 filings in coordinated sequence was not improvisation. It was pre-built architecture waiting for a trigger. Challenge standing, he said. Already done. Court assigned priority panel and issued provisional hold on asset transfer clauses in contested zones. Terrell's tone sharpened. They cannot freeze continuity rights at this scale. They just did, the analyst replied. One deck below, relay officers began reporting harder problems. Fuel bond authentication failed at 2 league-controlled depots. Maintenance drones refused to service holes with disputed lien status. A carrier tender requesting emergency consumables was told to seek arbitration. Each denial arrived wrapped in meticulous legal language and valid compact signatures. Owen pulled up the underlying code signatures himself. Human fingerprints were all over it, layered beneath perfectly lawful process calls. They had not launched a cyber attack in the crude sense. They had turned the League's own automation thresholds against its credit assumptions. Across the system, at Earth Defense Command, Admiral Mitchell watched the same denials light up on his strategic map and permitted himself one breath of grim satisfaction. Novak, he said over secure line, your accountants are terrifying. Anna Novak, seated in a dark operations bay 3 floors below him, did not look up from her console. They are programmers with legal training. Fear is optional. Accuracy is mandatory. On Relay 9, the Krelliks still held the station. Their Marines controlled customs decks and docking spines, and from any ordinary tactical measure the humans looked outpositioned. Civilian traffic was frozen. Insurance firms were issuing contradictory advisories. Neutral traders drifted at safe distance, waiting to see which law would survive the week. Yet human military traffic had gone strangely quiet in the most crowded lanes. Convoys vanished from predicted routes and reappeared on obscure vectors through old industrial corridors the League's navigation models had tagged as economically irrelevant. Velari refugee transports, moments from interception, slipped behind registered humanitarian escorts from species Owen had considered politically inert. Every reroute was legal. Every timing window was deliberate. By dawn over Earth, the first compact provisional order hit public nets in all member languages. Krellik's claims associated with continuance coercion were frozen pending tribunal review. That should have slowed the crisis. Instead, Owen escalated. He signed seizure authority for expanded operations and dictated a chamber statement framing human resistance as a threat to galactic health security. When the draft reached his display for final authentication, he added one line himself. If humanity preferred decay to order, the League would administer order without consent. He stamped it and sent it. In Hall C, Hayes read the statement as it propagated and handed her slate to Sullivan without comment. The colonel scanned the line Owen had inserted, jaw tightening once. Mitchell came in over secure channel. He just crossed from coercion to open intent. Your call. Hayes looked through the chamber viewport at the dim arc of station lights and the traffic beyond, orderly on the surface, brinksmanship underneath. Then we stopped treating this as a misunderstanding, she said. Authorize full response package. We proceed by law first, logistics second, force if required. Sullivan nodded. Novak had already begun. Mitchell answered with the quiet certainty of a man who had waited years for this exact sentence. Understood. All commands executing. Understood. All commands executing. The words had barely cleared Mitchell's channel when Hall C's auxiliary displays split into 22 live windows, each one a courtroom intake node from a different member system. Human legal teams appeared in compressed rows of dark uniforms and civilian jackets, some in embassy booths, some in shipboard compartments, one standing in a cargo terminal because the nearest secure office had already been sealed for evidence handling. Hayes stayed at the central console while Novak routed authentication keys through compact archival mirrors, hard-coded to public visibility. If the Krelliks tried to claim procedural ambiguity later, they would have to erase half the galaxy first. Filing package Alpha through Rho submitted, said lead counsel Miriam Okafor from Luna Annex, voice-controlled and almost conversational despite the speed. All reciprocal compact triggers attached. Fraud architecture index attached. Medical coercion taxonomy attached. Requesting immediate injunctive relief, emergency custodial authority over contested civilians, and temporary suspension of private enforcement fleets pending tribunal. A Kith observer judge blinked both nictitating membranes and asked, "On what standing do 21 polities synchronize this action under one sponsor within a single cycle?" Okafor did not hesitate. Standing derives from multilateral anti-coercion articles ratified over 19 years. Drafting records show human legal aid teams authored baseline language at partner request after prior debt annexation events in Corral, Ven, and Talus sectors. We are not improvising. We are invoking. That landed harder than any accusation. In 3 lines, she had reframed humanity from emotional objector to quiet architect. Owen's hollow signal forced priority insertion into the chamber feed before judicial lockout protocols finished. His image appeared at full scale, posture rigid, translator running half a breath too loud. Compact panel. This coordinated filing constitutes market sabotage and unlawful interference with licensed continuance operations. The League's contracts predate these alleged anti-coercion supplements and remain binding under continuity doctrine. Hayes accepted speaking priority with a thumbprint and answered before the judges could be pressured into procedural detours. High Commander Owen, your own submission to this chamber represented continuance as voluntary access. You cannot now claim emergency supremacy when your voluntary uptake failed. We present forged consent signatures from Relay 9, unlawful detention records for Volari civilians, and debt inheritance clauses tied to biological dependency. Your framework monetizes mortality and calls it governance. The law does not require patience with that. Novak flicked 2 fingers across her slate. Evidence bundles hit the judicial queue in clean sequence. Cryptographic mismatch reports on the forged Earth signatures, time-stamped customs logs showing Valeri identity tags rewritten mid-transit, and a translation matrix proving Krelliks enforcement text had replaced the standard term for care recipient with collateral subscriber in 43 active claims. There was no dramatic music, no raised voices, only documents slotting into place like lockpins. The presiding judge, from the Scholars of Lum, spoke at last. Interim order. By authority of Compact Emergency Statute 12.7, all League enforcement claims tied to continuance dependency are frozen pending fraud adjudication. Asset transfer clauses are suspended. Detained non-combatants in contested corridors are transferred to neutral custodial protection under joint humanitarian supervision. Any attempt to enforce suspended claims by armed presence will be treated as hostile contempt of court. Owen's mandibles tightened. You are placing galactic health continuity at risk. The Lum judge's expression did not change. The League placed it at risk when it coupled treatment with sovereignty seizure. In the back row of Hall C, Sullivan folded his arms and murmured to Mitchell over a private line. For a species that sells immortality, they are very bad at thinking past this quarter. Mitchell replied, dry as dust. Short-term planning is eternal when nobody survives to file complaints. The order propagated within minutes, and the first surprise became visible everywhere at once. Compact marshals sealed Krelix trustee accounts in 6 financial exchanges. Neutral port authorities switched leak docking status to provisional review. Insurance underwriters invalidated emergency annex certificates without tribunal co-signature. 2 minor navies the Krelix had long treated as decorative dispatched corvettes to Valari routes carrying blue and white custodian beacons. They did not fire a shot. They simply parked in the lanes and cited court authority every time a leak cutter challenged them. On Relay 9, the Krelix boarding commander received 3 contradictory command updates in 14 minutes. Maintain seizure posture, suspend asset transfer, preserve medical continuity without exercising jurisdiction. The station's civilian controller, who had spent 9 terrified hours expecting a marine breach on operations deck, read the interim order twice, then opened a channel to every docked vessel and announced in a voice that shook only once. By compact directive, all claims of mandatory annexation are under freeze. Civilian traffic will remain orderly. No one is to alter registry tags without joint oversight. The panic Owen had predicted never matured. It dissolved into procedures, queues, and mutual verification networks that humans had seeded years ago, and most species had barely noticed. By the time Earth rotated into local noon, the second layer of the same legal surprise hit the Krelix where they lived. Reputation arbitrage. 21 governments that had once accepted human legal templates released synchronized statements, each brief, each almost clinical, affirming that they had joined the injunction not from fear of war but from direct memory of league debt predation. Ancient grievances became admissible context overnight. The merchants of Pax published archived correspondence showing Krelix negotiators proposing care-linked labor harmonization decades before continuance wells were publicly marketed. The Wanderers of Vin confirmed they had warned compact committees about inheritance bondage language and been ignored. Humanity had not assembled an alliance in the crisis. Humanity had spent 2 decades building a legal weather system and waited for pressure to drop. Owen saw the shift as a numbers problem first. Sentiment indexes in neutral systems moved from uncertainty to guarded support for enforcement review. Market confidence in league sovereign bonds dipped 6 points, then 12. 3 client worlds requested clarification on whether their own continuance contracts might be voidable under coercion standards if the tribunal ruled against the league. That question, once spoken aloud, was contagion. He transmitted a formal objection to the court and received an auto-response assigning him a hearing slot behind 14 priority petitions from species he had considered irrelevant. From the human side, Hayes treated the ruling as phase completion, not victory. She convened a secure triad with Mitchell and Novak, while Sullivan coordinated non-combatant transfers from Valorii lanes. Capability reveal achieved, Novak said, almost reluctantly, as if naming it risked vanity. They expected outrage and fleet movement. They got injunctive architecture and reputational fracture. Their command bandwidth is now split between military posture and legal containment. Mitchell studied overlays of Relay 9 and surrounding transfer nodes. They still hold steel on target. A frozen claim with Marines behind it is a hostage by another name. Hayes nodded. Then, we maintain pressure without giving them their preferred narrative. We obey every court order exactly. We document every deviation they make. If they escalate, the record escalates with them. She switched channels and addressed the compact press pool in a statement that ran 87 seconds and carried to every major system. Humanity rejects coercive continuance frameworks, Humanity does not reject care, science, or longer life freely chosen. We will protect civilians, including Krellic civilians, from disruption caused by unlawful enforcement. We are prepared for tribunal, prepared for interdiction, and prepared for accountability. The law is not a delay tactic. It is the first line of defense. That line circulated for the rest of the day, quoted by species that had never previously used human legal language. On the ledger of dawn, none of that felt like process. It felt like ground shifting under engineered certainty. Owen dismissed external observers from his command theater and sealed the room to executive tier. Sub-executor Tyrrell remained, along with Finance Marshal Quen, Fleet Strategist Ralvek, and 2 continuity directors whose authority usually outranked military officers whenever contracts were in motion. Now, they stood in uneasy proximity, each discipline blaming the others with professional vocabulary. Quen spoke first, upper hands clasped tight enough to rasp against armor edges. The injunction is temporary. We can endure if we stabilize perception and keep treatment cycles running for core subscribers. Ralvek's jaw plates twitched. Endure with what fuel? Delta 3, Delta 5, and Epsilon gates still deny automatic docking. 2 reserve depots switched us to contested lien status after the court order flagged our claims as non-priority liabilities. My escorts are burning maneuver reserves while legal teams argue punctuation. Tyrrell turned to Owen. Authorize direct seizure of disputed depots. We can present it as emergency continuity security. Quen snapped. Seizing neutral ports under injunction converts a legal review into collective sanctions. Half our middle market partners will suspend trade to avoid secondary liability. They already are, Ralvek said, slowly. The continuity directors exchanged a glance that Owen recognized as fear hidden inside arithmetic. Director Sell spoke with forced calm. Elite subscribers on core worlds are asking whether maintenance intervals remain guaranteed. We have suppressed rumor channels, but delay metrics are visible to anyone with a calendar. If confidence collapses, local governors will demand preferential access. If we grant it, outer habitats revolt. If we deny it, central investors revolt. For the first time in years, Owen heard the phrase nobody in League Command ever spoke aloud. Countdown. Not to extinction, to credibility. The League had sold control as permanence. A visible maintenance disruption would expose the business truth beneath the doctrine. He expanded the strategic map until Relay 9 floated at the center, then layered human traffic data, court restrictions, and port denials over his own force posture. The pattern did not look like spontaneous resistance. It looked like a species that had studied Krellic's operating assumptions and designed counters for each phase. Challenge jurisdiction, freeze transfer, protect civilians, reroute commerce, force decision strain. Assessment, Owen said. Terrell answered first, as expected. Humans are still biologically finite, politically fragmented, and emotionally vulnerable to scarcity messaging. Their present discipline is manufactured by centralized information control. We should intensify scarcity projections on fringe networks, induce health anxiety, and trigger internal petition cascades for access. Quen made a dismissive click. That model is stale. Their civilian channels are self-correcting and cross-verified faster than our narrative teams can see doubt. They built trust infrastructure in advance. Ralvek added, and their military silence is wrong. We expected visible mobilization for deterrence theater. Instead, we see route disappearance and dark traffic through low-value corridors. Either they are hiding weakness or staging assets we cannot map in time. Owen looked to Sell. Continuity risk threshold. Sell hesitated, then gave the number. If current logistics friction persists, and we lose 2 additional distribution nodes, premium tier maintenance failure probability rises above politically survivable levels in 31 days. A silence followed that no one could smooth over. Owen remembered Hayes at the console, voice level, while she called his framework hostage management. He had interpreted it as moral posturing for the chamber. Now, he recalculated. Perhaps she had been describing deployment doctrine. His first instinct was still domination through process plus force, the method that had broken 23 younger civilizations. But those civilizations had entered negotiations alone, each convinced its suffering was unique. Humanity had spent years making sure suffering became shared evidence. He opened a channel to League provincial governors and watched their faces populate in a grid. Investors, military prefects, continuity trustees, each one already receiving contradictory pressure from citizens who believed immortality was a right and from accountants who knew it was a supply chain. "Listen," Owen said, and his voice came out flatter than he intended. "The compact injunction is an overreach driven by human theatrics. We will challenge it and restore order. Until then, all regions will prioritize continuity stability, suppress panic messaging, and maintain compliance posture. No unilateral concessions. No unauthorized military incidents." Governor Pelek from Inner Ring Habitat 3 interrupted protocol. "What assurances do we provide when subscribers ask if their cycles are secure?" Owen answered with the only line he could give. "Tell them continuity remains under League protection." The governor held his gaze a heartbeat too long before nodding. Confidence did not return to the grid. After the call, Terral stepped closer, lowering his voice. "High Commander, permission to speak plainly. If we retreat now, we validate every coercion claim and invite dissolution challenges across all sectors. If we push hard and fast, we may still fracture human politics before their hidden assets mature." Owen studied the map again, focusing on Helix Junction, where 6 trade arteries converged and where a decisive breakthrough could reconnect distribution lines if secured. The route was risky under court scrutiny. It was also the only path that offered strategic compression. "We regroup," he said at last. "Consolidate carriers at Helix under continuity protection mandate. Legal teams will frame it as infrastructure safeguarding. We will restore corridor control before this injunction calcifies into doctrine." Quen flared her crest. "That concentration will be interpreted as pre-assault mobilization." "Then let them interpret," Owen replied. "A court order without enforceable force is annotation." Ralvik bowed his head once, already calculating fuel and escort attrition. As the command staff dispersed, Owen remained alone with the rotating map and the thin hum of life support systems that every continuant citizen trusted without understanding. He had spent a career turning law into leverage. Humanity had just shown him a mirror version built for defense, memory, and patient retaliation. He still believed they would crack under enough pressure. Belief, however, no longer felt like certainty. It felt like a deadline. He opened a private channel to forward reconnaissance and gave the next instruction with clipped precision. "Deploy probes along Helix approaches. I want full telemetry on non-commercial traffic, especially human dark lane transits. If they are hiding reserves, we find them before they find us." Across the void, those probes launched into routes humans had already marked, cataloged, and quietly prepared to close. The first 2 never reported back. The third returned clean telemetry for 11 minutes, then fed the Ledger of Dawn a perfect map of empty freight corridors that did not exist outside a simulation sandbox Novak's teams had built years earlier for piracy drills. By the time Krellick's analysts identified the forgery, a second layer of denials had begun hitting League logistics in sectors they had considered secure. On Earth, Anna Novak stood in Operations Bay 4, lights kept low to reduce eye strain, and watched her staff execute what they called lawful starvation. They were not hacking propulsion systems or life support. They were touching ledgers, lien registries, arbitration queues, and automated compliance governors that every major port trusted more than any living official. Each change had a legal citation attached. Each citation was real. Delta Spine just switched another 4 depots to contested collateral review, said one analyst. Good, Novak answered. Attach tribunal docket references before they appeal. I want every denial wrapped in process so tight they choke on paperwork before they can call it sabotage. A second analyst raised a hand. Krelik's legal cluster is trying to isolate our signature path and petitioning for emergency exception under continuity stability doctrine. Novak slid a tablet across his desk. They can petition. While they petition, relay this to the compact insurers. If enforcement fleets hold disputed assets during active fraud review, underwriters carry direct liability for coercion outcomes. Watch how fast insurers find a spine. The prediction held in less than 20 minutes. 3 insurance syndicates suspended coverage for league reclamation operations. Without coverage, neutral refit yards refused to process battle damage. Without refit access, fleet readiness projections dropped across 8 Krelik's task groups that had never expected logistics to behave like an enemy navy. High Commander Owen received the cascade while Helix staging orders were still routing to his carriers. His tactical officers expected reports of missile stockpiles and engine readiness. Instead, they got notices from dry legal language that might as well have been torpedoes. Port access denied pending collateral adjudication. Fuel bond frozen under provisional injunction. Docking authority rescinded by insurer risk directive. Maintenance drones unavailable due to labor strike under humanitarian clause. Owen read each line once and passed it to Ralvek without expression. The strategist's jaw plates flexed. They are not just in our systems, Ralvek said. They are in everyone else's fear of being seen with our systems. Quen, pale along her crest ridges, added, Continuity directors from 3 core habitats are requesting military escort for private supply ships. They do not trust our public queues. Denied, Owen said. No preferential convoys. That is how panic becomes visible. He turned to Terrell. Where are the human fleets? Terrell brought up reconnaissance plots and hated what he saw. Still fragmented and dark. Civilian shell yards in Seoul, Ceres, and Ven show irregular thermal spikes, but manifests list decommissioning work and cargo tug maintenance. No registered capital mobilization. No registered mobilization, Owen repeated. Different sentence. He ordered probes again, this time in hunter-killer pairs with independent recording cores. 4 pairs vanished along old industrial lanes. 1 pair reached a shell yard near the asteroid belt and sent back 38 seconds of footage before hard cut. Rust-streaked whole scaffolds peeling away like dry skin, revealing gunmetal geometry beneath. Long spinal launch rails masked for years under the profile of civilian dry dock trusses. The data died mid-frame, but the image stayed. Human reserves were real. The balance shifted in the command theater without a shot fired. Officers who had treated human warnings as performance now looked at one another with the careful stillness of professionals revising survival odds in real time. On Luna Annex, Hayes watched the same partial frame projected above a conference table, while Mitchell, joined by Hollow and Sullivan, arrived straight from a boarding prep deck. Armor magnet locks still dusted with polymer grit. No one celebrated. Capability 2 is now public to the people who matter, Mitchell said. They know we can map their logistics and field steel they did not count. They will either withdraw or rush Helix before the news closes. Novak's voice came over secure audio from Earth. Rush. Owen cannot survive a long attrition timeline. His elite maintenance cycles are visible and they are already counting days. Hayes folded her hands. Then, we shorten the decision window and keep civilian harm near zero. Sullivan nodded once. Boarding teams are configured for disablement and command capture. No hull ruptures unless there is no alternative. We have language packets in Krellick's trade cont, broadcasting surrender conditions every 90 seconds once operations begin. Mitchell gave him a sidelong look. You are assuming they listen. I am assuming their escorts do, Sullivan said. Captains with families in those habitats will hear the difference between slaughter and arrest. The line stayed with Hayes as she turned to her next task, one she considered as important as fleet posture. She requested open-channel access to the compact civic network and delivered a statement built for citizens, not admirals. For generations, too many species were told that life itself must be leased from whoever controlled the machines, she said, standing alone at a plain lectern with no flag behind her. Humanity refuses that bargain. We are not at war with longer life. We are at war with ownership disguised as care. We will not permit forced contracts in our space. We will not permit refugee detention for debt claims fabricated against the dead. We will not answer coercion with extermination. Krellick civilians will receive aid where needed. Krellick's officers who surrender will be treated under law. This is not revenge. This is boundary. If you are waiting to see whether we will fracture under fear, stop waiting. The message spread through labor nets, clinic boards, school channels, and freight unions almost instantly. On Mars, transfer rings, dock crews printed one sentence on maintenance stickers and slapped it onto tool lockers and cargo lifts. Life is not collateral. 9 hours after Owen's second probe losses, the Valari convoy he had tried to seize in the opening move reached neutral custody at Kithgate, under escort from 3 small species navies and 2 human cutters that never powered weapons above standby. Valari elders disembarked shaking and exhausted, then requested to speak on record. Compact moderators expected gratitude and got testimony. A Valari archivist named Sorel, wrapped in thermal cloth and speaking through a translator with a slight delay, addressed the chamber feed. The League designated us collateral subscribers against obligations we never signed. They cataloged our children by projected labor output. They called this continuity. Humans gave us escort status with no ownership terms. They asked only that we confirm names and routes so no one could vanish us in transit. We confirm. Another elder lifted a data slate with trembling hands. These are detention manifests from Krellick's cutters. Cross-check any line. You will find an organ health score beside each person and a debt forecast beside each score. That is their mercy. The testimony did what legal filings could not. It gave faces to abstract clauses. Neutral delegates who had stayed cautious through the injunction now moved into explicit support for enforcement. By late cycle, the atmosphere in Krellick's provincial channels had curdled from confidence into brittle outrage. Subscribers demanded guarantees. Governors demanded priority shipments. Continuity technicians reported harassment from citizens who feared skipped maintenance windows. Owen issued discipline notices and emergency reassurance bulletins. Confidence kept sliding. In Sol, human resolve hardened into rhythm. Convoys rerouted without panic. Clinics published transparent triage protocols in case of supply disruption and invited independent observers to verify there was no secret continuance stockpile being hoarded for elites. Civic councils held night forums where medical ethicists, veterans, faith leaders, and labor organizers all repeated the same principle in different language. Finitude was not failure. Coercion was. At Ceres Military Dock 6, Sullivan walked a line of Marines in staging armor while final checks blinked green across their chest plates. He did not deliver a cinematic speech. He delivered doctrine. "We are entering ships full of people taught we are barbarians," he said. "Some will shoot because they are loyal. Some because they are afraid of what happens if they stop. You disable weapons, secure command nodes, and offer surrender every time protocol says, offer surrender. You do not punish civilians. You do not vent compartments to save minutes. We are not here to prove we can kill Han. We are here to prove no one gets to own a lifespan." A sergeant near the middle asked, "And if they burn evidence?" Sullivan met his eyes. "Then we stop them alive if possible, dead only if necessary, and we mirror every recovered record to tribunal before anyone can edit history." The Marines answered with one word: quiet and absolute. Understood. From the Krellick's perspective, human unity looked unnatural. Terrell watched human channels for fracture and found argument instead of collapse, dissent without disintegration, local leaders criticizing federal timing, while still forwarding federal evacuation protocols and legal advisories. He sent Owen a private assessment he would have mocked a week earlier. Their cohesion is distributed rather than centralized. Removing one node does not create paralysis. Social trust appears to be preloaded through civic institutions rather than command fear. Owen read it and closed the file. He no longer had use for old assumptions, but new ones were expensive, and time was shrinking. 3 days from the initial warning, Helix Junction became the center of every strategic map in the compact. 6 major arteries, 2 civilian megahubs, and 1 continuance backbone relay all intersected there. If Owen punched through, he could reconnect distribution and claim humanitarian necessity. If humans closed it first, the League's enforcement model would choke beyond recovery. Mitchell convened final planning from Earth Defense with Hayes, Novak, Sullivan, and allied observers patched from Kith and Lum. The room smelled of recycled air and burnt coffee. No one sat. "Layer 1, Mitchell said, expanding the tactical display. "Decoy frigates from 3rd Reserve draw Krellick's heavy guns into narrow approach vectors. They look like the obvious target, and they know it." "Layer 2, Novak continued. "Autonomous drone swarms seed gravitic mines in those vectors after gun commitment. Mines collapse maneuver corridors without indiscriminate blast radii. Ships can still surrender and drift clear." Sullivan took Layer 3. "Boarding groups strike carrier spines with precision kinetic packages to kill command mobility, not life support. We clamp, breach, and take decks node by node. Broadcast surrender options every 90 seconds in Krellick's and TradeCont. Medical teams embedded at point of entry." Hayes listened, then asked the question she always asked before authorizing force. "Civilian compartment risk." "Contained," Sullivan said. "Not zero. Never zero, but below treaty threshold and lower than any alternative that leaves Owen operational." The Kith observer bowed her head. "If he refuses surrender," Mitchell answered before anyone else. "Then we arrest him where he stands and put his contracts on trial with him." By the end of that same rotation, human reserve fleets began moving in earnest, no longer hidden in shell yards, hulls marked with old unit insignia that had not been seen in public registries for decades. They did not rush Helix in a single triumphant wave. They arrived in disciplined rings, each ring locking another approach corridor, each corridor closure announced with legal citations and surrender frequencies. At Helix Junction, Owen stood on the ledger of dawn and watched the tactical plot fill with human signatures until the map looked less like a battlefield than a verdict being written. For the first time since entering compact politics, he requested direct channel to Ambassador Hayes without preconditions. Her image appeared on his command display, expression unreadable, uniform severe and unadorned. Owen spoke in formal standard, each word clipped. Ambassador, withdraw your blockade and restore continuity transit under joint supervision. We can still avoid catastrophic destabilization. Hayes held his gaze. Release all detained civilians, stand down enforcement fleets, and submit command authority to tribunal compliance officers. Do that, and your people get aid corridors, medical stabilization teams, and lawful transition. Refuse, and Helix decides this for you. He gave a thin, bitter click. You would risk millions on principle. We are protecting millions from ownership, she replied. Those are not the same thing. The channel closed. Minutes later, both fleets finished final alignment in the dark between stars, and Helix Junction waited at the edge of ignition. Minutes later became seconds, and then Helix ignited. High Commander Owen gave the first order with ritual calm. Carrier line advance. Break their outer ring at Vector Spine 3. Continuity corridor takes priority over all secondary losses. Around him, the ledger of dawn vibrated as its formation engines pushed tonnage into the junction throat, flanked by escort screens and contract destroyers stacked in textbook depth. On his tactical display, human signatures held steady, almost passive, as if waiting for permission to resist. Admiral David Mitchell watched that same display from Earth Defense Command and let the Krellix line commit 3,000 kilometers deeper into the channel before speaking. Third Reserve. Execute Lantern. Decoys burn bright and run narrow. Do not die for theater. Draw their heavy batteries and keep moving. His tone stayed level, the way a surgeon might discuss incision depth. Human decoy frigates surged from the outer ring in staggered arcs, transponders broadcasting command-grade profiles they did not actually carry. To Krellix targeting doctrine, they looked like vital nodes. To human doctrine, they were bait with excellent engines. Krellix heavy guns answered exactly as predicted. Beams and kinetic lances converged into the narrow approach vectors, saturating space that had seemed tactically obvious for 40 years of League war manuals. The first decoy took a glancing strike and spun, armor stripping in bright fragments, then recovered thrust and kept running. The second split its thermal signature into 6 false blooms and vanished into the glare. The third transmitted one dry line over encrypted human command. They are very committed to this bad idea, just before diving through a corridor that would not exist 5 seconds later. Layer 2, Novak said in Operations Bay 4. Autonomous drone swarms, released earlier from cargo hulls and masked as routine salvage clouds, unfolded in precise lattices along those gun-locked vectors. Each drone seeded a gravitic mine no larger than a lifeboat pod. None detonated with cinematic fire. They altered local geometry in sharp pulses that folded maneuver corridors inward like collapsing scaffolds. Krellix destroyers attempting correction found their turn radii suddenly wrong, formation spacing shredded by mathematics instead of explosions. 2 escorts clipped one another and lost thrust. A carrier wing stalled into its own screen, forcing emergency cutoffs across 6 ships to prevent cascading collisions. On the ledger of dawn, fleet strategist Ralvek swore without raising his voice. Maneuver channels are collapsing in sequence. They mapped our doctrine tree. Owen snapped. Burn through. Forward batteries clear a path. Cannot, Ralvek answered. The mines are distributed and reactive, and we fire blind, we kill our own approach. The first surrender broadcast arrived on all League tactical bands in Krellix and Tradecant, cleanly translated and perfectly timed. Krellix vessels at Helix Junction, this is United Human Defense Command. Your mobility is compromised. Power down weapons and declare surrender. Medical support and lawful processing are guaranteed. Resistance will be disabled. 90 seconds later, the message repeated. Mitchell did not allow anyone in his room to call that psychological warfare. "It is procedural," he said when a junior officer used the phrase. "Procedure keeps people alive." With corridors constricted and heavy guns misaligned, Layer 3 began. Human precision kinetic strikes launched from reserve destroyers hidden behind the blockade rings, each package shaped for one task: disable carrier spines, not vent civilian decks. Impacts walked along the ledger formation like a line of hammer taps against structural joints. Engine control trunks severed. Command relays blanked. External weapon mounts froze mid-cycle. One command carrier tried to roll broadside and discovered its spine actuators had become dead mass. Sullivan received the green signal at Ceres Dock 6 and boarded his assault shuttle with no speech at all. He had already given doctrine. Now he gave coordinates. Target 1, Ledger of Dawn. Clamp sequence on my mark. We take command decks and data vaults. Evidence preservation overrides trophy capture. Around him, Marine helmets locked, medical techs checked restraint kits, and language officers synced surrender loops for corridor speakers. Human boarding doctrine looked less like rage than civil engineering under fire. At Helix, the first powered clamps struck Krelik's hull, plating with brutal certainty. Magnetic teeth bit. Plasma cutters traced circles, and boarding tunnels rammed through pressure locks. Marines entered in teams of 8, shields forward, shock foam and pulse carbines set to incapacitation bias. Every 90 seconds, regardless of firefight status, corridor speakers repeated the same terms in 2 languages. Drop weapons. Lie prone. Hands visible. You will be treated under compact law. Krelik's resistance came hard at first. Drilled reflex meeting. Disciplined intrusion. In Auxiliary Spine 3, a Marine squad took concentrated fire from an elevated gantry and answered with directed stunners that dropped the defenders without rupturing the compartment. In Navigation Core 2, a Krelik's lieutenant attempted to vent a transit hall and found the control node physically blocked by human breach gel set to permanent lockout. In Data Vault Ring C, 2 League technicians surrendered immediately when shown warrant codes and tribunal chain of custody protocols. 40 minutes into the engagement, Helix shifted from battle to collapse. The decisive fracture came not on command decks, but among the escorts, where captains could see enough of the whole board to understand consequence. Human ships were crippling drives and guns, then broadcasting lanes for surrender and rescue. They were not executing disabled crews. They were not torching life support. Every minute a captain continued resisting, the legal exposure worsened, and the survival odds did not. One by one, escort transponders flipped from combat red to compliance white. Then, whole flotillas followed. On Owen's Bridge, the tactical map bled icons, not from annihilation, from abandonment. Sub-Executor Terrell stared at the cascading surrender markers and said what no one else dared. They are choosing prosecution over loyalty. They are choosing survival, Quen replied, voice hollow. Because humans made survival compatible with surrender. The 3rd direct surrender prompt arrived for the Ledger of Dawn itself, this one routed to command authority only. Mitchell's face appeared in a narrow inset, expression unreadable. High Commander Owen, this is Admiral David Mitchell, United Human Defense Command. You have lost mobility, formation integrity, and legal standing. Power down all weapons, release command codes, and prepare for boarding custody. This is your 3rd notice. Owen cut the channel and turned to his continuity directors. Initiate Vault Purge. Priority 1. Burn contract archives, subscriber indexing, and enforcement logs. If they want trial, give them rumor. One continuity director froze. Data burn will erase medical continuity maps for dependent habitats. Do it. Owen hissed. The officer's hands hovered over the console, then moved. Alarm glyphs flashed across the bridge as purge protocols armed. In boarding tunnel 7, Sullivan saw the alert spike across his visor feed and accelerated. Command dais now. Burn protocol armed. Move! His team hit the inner blast door with a shaped breacher, flooded the breach with stun haze, and drove through into the Ledger's central theater while Krellick security scrambled to form a line around the dais. Sullivan did not fire first. He triggered corridor speakers on full volume. Bridge personnel, stand down. Data destruction is a tribunal offense. Weapons down now. 3 guards complied. 2 did not. The exchange lasted 6 seconds, all force concentrated, no stray fire into control banks. A shock round caught one guard center mass and dropped him against the rail. Another lunged for a sidearm and was pinned by foam restraint before he could clear the holster. Owen reached for the purge key himself. Sullivan closed the distance and slammed him off the console, both of them crashing into the command dais edge. The Krellick's commander was larger, armored, and desperate. Sullivan had leverage, mag boots, and a team sealing every angle. They hit the deck hard enough to rattle the hollow projectors. Owen drove an elbow into Sullivan's shoulder plate, trying to twist free toward the keywell. Sullivan hooked his arm, forced him flat, and locked a restraint clamp over one wrist, then the other. "You are under arrest by authority of the Galactic Compact and the United Human Defense Charter," Sullivan said, breathing hard but steady. Around them, Marines secured the bridge in practiced sequence. Weapons collected. Consoles isolated. Purge protocols interrupted at 91% arm and rolled back under forensic lock. A tech shouted, "Data vault preserved, mirroring in progress." Owen bared his mandibles, fury stripped down to contempt. You would rather die than live forever. A secure holoplate rose from the command rail, and Ambassador Elena Hayes appeared at life-scale. Image crisp, despite battle interference. She met Owen's gaze without triumph. "We would rather live free than forever owned." For the first time since entering the chamber weeks earlier, Owen had no prepared cadence left, no contractual reframing that could restore control. He looked past Hayes to the bridge displays where surrender signals now outnumbered active firing solutions by a factor of 9. On one screen, human medical teams were already boarding a disabled Krellick's carrier under white corridor lights. He spat the only weapon still available. "You have broken continuity for billions." Hayes answered in the same measured tone she had used for the first warning. "You broke it when you tied care to chains. We are stabilizing what you weaponized." Sullivan hauled Owen to his feet and transferred him to 2 Marines with restraint tethers anchored at shoulder and waist. "Command deck secure," he transmitted. "Primary target alive. Attempted evidence burn interrupted and logged. Request custody route." Mitchell replied over FleetNet. "Custody route confirmed. Tribunal 1 has accepted immediate transfer under wartime evidentiary priority. Maintain full recording." The last organized Krellick's firing at Helix ended 12 minutes later when Ralvek ordered general stand-down and transmitted surrender authentication across remaining command bands. Human ships shifted from strike posture to containment geometry, opening safe drift lanes, dispatching rescue cutters, and tagging disabled hulls for joint salvage under compact observers. The junction that had waited at the edge of ignition now glowed with running lights, emergency beacons, and the slow movement of vessels choosing to survive. On the Ledger of Dawn, Owen was marched through the same corridor where he had once planned annexation schedules for Earth's high-demand demographics. Crew members watched from the bulkheads, some rigid with shame, others with relief so visible it looked like exhaustion. No one tried to free him. At the transfer lock, Sullivan paused long enough for chain of custody verification. Evidence cores, command logs, purge attempt records, detention manifests recovered from Valeri seizures, all mirrored and sealed. Every item received tribunal hash and witness signature. Nothing vanished into victory. Owen stepped onto the custody shuttle in restraints, crest lowered, but spine unbent. Hayes remained on hollow until the hatch cycled, then delivered the final formal statement for the record. High Commander Owen of the Krelix Merchant League, you are remanded to Compact Tribunal 1, pending charges including coercive sovereignty transfer, unlawful detention of protected civilians, fraud by forged consent, and attempted destruction of evidentiary archives during active hostilities. Proceedings will be public. Sentencing, if convicted, will be binding across all member systems. The hatch shut. The shuttle detached and turned toward tribunal space under armed escort. Behind it, Helix Junction held, battered but controlled, and the empire that had sold eternity as a contract term had just watched its signature model fail in real time. The first thing Colonel Marcus Sullivan heard after the firing stopped was not cheering. It was a Krelix medic shouting for plasma sealant and trade cont, while a human corpsman shoved a full kit across the deck and pointed to the nearest wounded guard. Sullivan stood on the ledger of Dawn command level, helmet off, sweat cooling under recycled air that smelled of scorched insulation and antiseptic mist. Human Marines moved through corridor intersections with practiced economy, tagging weapons lockers, scanning for hidden burn protocols, checking pressure integrity. At every secured hatch, surrender text still played on loop because procedure did not end when resistance did. A restrained Krelix lieutenant watched a human triage team stabilize one of his own officers, then looked up at Sullivan with raw confusion. "You won," the lieutenant said through a translator collar. "Why preserve us?" Sullivan crouched so the prisoner did not have to crane his neck. "Because winning and becoming you were never the same objective." 3 days after Helix, the first Mercy Corridor opened at Inner Ring Habitat 3, the very habitat whose governor had demanded cycle assurances from Owen. Admiral Mitchell watched the launch from Earth Defense Command while Ambassador Hayes stood in tribunal transit under hard white lights, preparing testimony. Between them, Novak routed authentication keys for cargo manifests that carried food, broad-spectrum medicine, and temporary anti-degenerative treatments stripped of every ownership clause. Mitchell keyed his channel to Hayes. Public opinion wants sanctions. Some delegates are asking for total service denial to force political collapse. Hayes did not look away from the evidence wall where forged Relay 9 signatures sat beside detention manifests and purge attempt logs. Service denial to civilians would make us an enforcement cartel with better branding. We prosecute command. We stabilize civilians. Hold the line. Mitchell exhaled once. Understood. Aid corridors remain active. At Kithgate Humanitarian Dock, Valeri archivist Sorrell stood with a thermal wrap around his shoulders while human engineers worked inside a damaged continuance well housing the size of a shuttle bay. They had posted terms on a hollow board in 6 languages. Emergency stabilization only. No labor claims. No jurisdiction transfer. Independent auditors present. A Krelix mother, carrying a child-height nutrient case, approached the distribution table, paused at the clause display, then asked the human quartermaster if she needed to sign debt acknowledgement. The quartermaster shook her head and handed over the case with both hands. You sign receipt for inventory accuracy, not obligation. If you want treatment, you get treatment. That is all. Sorrell recorded the exchange and sent it to Compact Archive under his own credentials. Later that same shift, he joined a live chamber feed and spoke with the same careful cadence he had used when confirming Valarii detention records. We were cataloged as collateral by the League and escorted as persons by humanity. Today I observed Krelix civilians receiving stabilization without ownership terms, under open audit from the same species that defeated their fleet. The record should state this clearly. Their mercy is procedural, not theatrical. Tribunal 1 began public proceedings in a chamber built for gravity and memory, walls lined with legal inscriptions from cases older than most civilizations. Physical evidence sat in transparent custody vaults at the center ring. The original continuance contract packet Hayes had placed on the steel table in the vault weeks earlier, now tagged with coercion annotations. Relay 9 forged consent slates with cryptographic mismatch overlays. Valeri detention manifests listing organ health scores beside labor forecasts, and the Ledger of Dawn purge key assembly, removed, logged, and sealed before Owen could erase command archives. Nothing remained implied. Owen stood in restraint bands at defendant position, crest ridges dulled but posture rigid. When the presiding panel asked for plea, he chose defiance. The League preserved continuity where lesser polities would have drowned in biological decay. We imposed structure because disorder kills faster than policy. Hayes took witness position and answered under oath, voice level enough to cut. Structure that can only function by transferring sovereignty, labor, and legal personhood to a private enforcement board is not continuity. It is feudal debt with medical leverage. We warned you in open session, with time to withdraw, in language no one could misread. Novak followed with technical testimony, walking the panel through ledger manipulations, fuel bond defaults, and insurer liability pivots, each step cross-referenced to lawful compact code. She ended by displaying the fake telemetry feed the Krellix probe had accepted. Then, the captured command query proving League reconnaissance had targeted civilian shell yards in advance of escalation. For the record, she said, this was not confusion. This was premeditated enforcement with fraud support. The sentence arrived at the end of 6 full hearing cycles, broadcast live across member systems. High Commander Owen was convicted on charges of coercive sovereignty transfer, unlawful detention of protected civilians, fraud by forged consent, and attempted destruction of evidence during active hostilities. The tribunal imposed life sentence without command privilege, permanent disqualification from any jurisdictional office, and mandatory truth audit access to all command archives under compact supervision. Owen looked toward Hayes when the sentence was read, searching for triumph and finding none. Captured officers received individual trials, not mass judgment. In one hearing, fleet strategist Ralphek submitted verified corridor codes that allowed rapid release of debt-bonded crews from 3 League labor stations. The panel reduced his confinement term accordingly. In another, Sub-Executor Terral refused cooperation and received full sentence with restitution obligations tied to recovered assets. The distinction was deliberate and public. Accountability was personal. Species guilt was rejected. By late winter on Earth, the call Sullivan had made from the Ledger command deck was formally closed in the tribunal registry. Evidence cores mirrored at Helix were authenticated complete. Chain of custody signatures matched every transfer node. No data loss, no unauthorized edits. The young attaché, who had once asked Hayes whether Relay 9 would be hit, now sat as deputy clerk for enforcement review, reading closure notices into the record with steady hands. 2 years after Helix, the Galactic Compact reconvened in the same central chamber where Owen had first offered eternity for sovereignty. This time, the amber commercial lighting request was gone. Star maps turned in clear white-blue above the floor, and the old Krellix banner with continuance is stability had been archived as Exhibit 17 in tribunal history. In its place hung the charter seal of the Krellix Cooperative Exchange, rechartered under permanent compact audit sapient rights compliance code embedded in every trade protocol, and a non-waivable human observer veto on any life extension contract containing jurisdiction transfer language. Hayes stood beside Sorel of the Valeri, a Kith magistrate, and 2 Krelix civilian delegates elected after the League dissolution. Mitchell watched from fleet liaison with retirement papers unsigned in his pocket. Novak stood at technical oversight with a tablet full of audit triggers and no visible satisfaction. Sullivan remained in ceremonial black, left shoulder still stiff in cold weather from the ledger dais struggle, expression unreadable. The free lifespan accord came to the floor line by line, not as a slogan, but as enforceable architecture. No life extension technology could be tied to sovereignty transfer. No medical continuity service could impose inherited debt across biological lines. Any enforcement action near refugee corridors triggered automatic external review. Emergency treatment access could not be conditioned on labor quotas or custodial surrender. Violation triggered immediate injunction and joint interdiction authority. When Hayes delivered the adoption address, the chamber stayed still enough to hear fabric move. For 2 years, we have been patient while courts untangled contracts written to turn fear into obedience. We hoped the League would choose reform before collapse. It chose coercion, then force, then erasure. You all saw the result. Humanity did not refuse longer life. Humanity refused ownership of life. That distinction now belongs to law, not rhetoric. Let this accord state what Helix proved under fire and what these audits prove in peace. Care without consent is control. Continuity without rights is captivity. And mortality does not make a species weak. Finitude sharpens responsibility. It teaches us that time is precious because it is bounded, that loyalty matters because it can be lost, and that power must answer to memory. We remember who offered help without chains when we were small. We remember who tried to put a price tag on breath. We will continue to protect both truths. Sign this accord and the galaxy keeps its science without surrendering its soul. The vote passed above supermajority threshold with no abstentions from member worlds that had witnessed the hearings. Even former League client systems voted yes after audit guarantees were read into force. After signatures, Sorel approached Sullivan near the chamber exit, where delegates traded formal bows and quiet relief. Our children sleep without registry tags now, the Valeri archivist said. Your people kept the promise. Sullivan glanced toward Hayes, who was speaking with the new Krelix delegates about shipment timing for civilian clinics. We kept the boundary, he said. The promise was yours to survive long enough to collect. The final administrative threads closed before adjournment. Relay. 9 was restored to civilian authority under joint oversight, and its forged annexation broadcast marked permanently falsified in compact media registries. Valeri collateral designations were voided across all surviving League databases. Probe telemetry fraud files were declassified to military academies as case study. The emergency calls from governors, insurers, and custody marshals were entered with disposition outcomes attached, each one closed, each one public. At the end of session, chamber lights dimmed to evening mode and the star map above shifted to a live view of Helix Junction. Where battle icons had once crowded tactical displays, civilian transponders now moved through ordered lanes. Freighters, hospital ships, refugee transports with permanent protection status, and one neutral courier carrying audit teams to former League worlds. Human and Krelix vessels shared spacing protocols under the same traffic law. No one in the gallery called humanity primitive anymore. The phrase that moved quietly from delegate to delegate, translated and retranslated until it settled into common use, was simpler and harder to misinterpret. They were the species that could not be bought.